Today on With the First Pick, we'll tell you which 15 players can improve their draft stock at the NFL Combine next week in Indianapolis. And we have a special guest to help us do that. That's right. We're joined by Mike Renner. And Rick, got some bad news for you. We finally got someone on the pod who has better hair than you. How you feel about that?
I got a haircut just for this, actually. So I was trying to compete with Rick here.
You know what's funny? And Rick, I don't know if you know this, but Mike is a Notre Dame guy. He and Brady are tight. But Rick gets angry at me daily. He was passive-aggressively angry at the Senior Bowl when I pointed out how handsome Sam Hartman's hair was from the stands. And Rick did not take well to that.
Oh, no, I'm trying to evaluate players, and the guy's talking about dude's hairs there. I thought we were down there for a purpose to try to figure out what these guys are, but apparently I didn't know we were working for a hair salon.
It is distracting, though. I wish they didn't invite him because you can't help but look at him when you're trying to evaluate these other guys, right?
Thank you.
I'm fine. I can isolate. I can focus and hone in on what I need to get done. But Mike, I just want to promote our podcast With the First Pick. So thank you for being.
I've heard good things about it.
There, Ryan, I checked the box for you. My God.
This is a conversation. Yeah, I had to give Rick a scolding in front of Mike, and it got ugly a moment ago before the podcast. But we'll talk about that later. By the way, and Rick, of course, you know this because you go on the PFF podcast, but Mike was the head of the NFL draft coverage from 2018 to 2023 for PFF, and now you can find him on his podcast, Renner Ranks. Find that wherever you get your podcast. I'm, of course, Ryan Wilson. That's Rick Spielman. And this little bit we have here, Mike, with our makeshift draft board here. Rick, how many days to the 2024 NFL draft?
Mike, I know you're counting this down as well on your podcast, but there is 65 days until the 2024 NFL draft. And we're going to keep counting that down on With the First Pick. We just want to make sure that we promote it out there so everybody hears that this is the first pick countdown clock.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's simple, Rick. Just throw the old pod while you're out there. All right. Okay. So, Mike, Rick is big on clear and concise instructions from our producer, Debo, here. So I don't think he can get any clearer or more concise than this, Rick. We'll each give 5 players who can help their draft stock with strong combines. And Rick, you and I will be in Indy next week with the First Pick, the podcast that we host together. And I think we'll be having shows Tuesday through Friday at least. So look forward to that. But for now, Rick, are the instructions clear?
I got it. Yeah, I can't wait to talk about your surprise guys that you put on this fine list that you came up with over the weekend that caused me a little angst, but it gave me an opportunity to go back and study film on some down the line.
Good. And Mike, you're probably aware of this if for no other reason than the last 3 minutes here. Rick is incredibly frank with his takes, and it's refreshing. Let's put it that way. So, Rick, I'll ask you quickly, just don't give away names because Mike's going to go through his list first here. Anyone on Mike's list that gave you a Ryan Wilson adjective moment, or do you?
I love Mike's list. I thought they were all fine young men, and I thought they were all very good players.
All right, Mike, let's do it. First up is one of my favorite players. Rick is he's not Rick's CB 1 or 2, I don't think, and he may not be mine either, but Nate Wiggins out of Clemson. We talked about him over the summer, but he's on your list of guys who can certainly help themselves next week in Indianapolis.
Yes, to me, he is the best pure cover guy in this class, and he has the traits to do it. He's 6'2", 185, and that's one of the things I'm just looking at seeing is he actually 6'2"? What's his wingspan? What's he going to come in at? Because 6'2", 185 is a skinny corner, and it shows on tape. Like, he's not necessarily physical. He struggles as a tackler. Like, he has weaknesses that revolve a lot around kind of that issue of his game. But just from an athlete perspective, he, to me, is the best in this cornerback class. So fluid. I watch him game to game. I watch him against the FSU game, and his ability to just mirror those big monsters that FSU had in the outside, Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson. It was easy for him. It just looks easy. And then, so I'm excited to see like what he runs in the 40. And obviously, because cornerback's such a trait-driven position with having to be able to have makeup speed, having to be able to make up ground, because you're always kind of fighting from behind at that position. So to be, though, that high-end cover corner, you do need high-end cover trait or physical traits. So is he going to tick those boxes? I think he does. I mean, I watched him hawk down the the North Carolina running back, the Miami running back in 2 games this year from like 5 yards behind him at the goal line to force fumbles. I think his speed's there. So just excited to see like what kind of athlete he really is at the end of the day.
Rick, we talked about him last podcast, so I want to ask you specifics as you get fired up about that. But you do agree he's a first-round pick, right?
Yeah, no, I think he's a first-round pick. But Mike, since I'm like the sourpuss on this podcast, everybody has a role to fill. Apparently, I always got to be the bad guy because everybody, throws flowers at Ryan Wilson except myself. But the one question I had, and I did the summer scouting, and I really had an issue with some of the run support stuff. I think he's gotten better this year, but I can't get out of my head Elam from Florida, who Buffalo took with the #1 overall pick, who was long, who was athletic, who I thought had really good cover skills coming out of Florida, but I thought he was very suspect in run support. So that's where I had some flashbacks of Wiggins a little bit, maybe why I wasn't as high. But I do recognize the cover skill. I do recognize everything. The one thing that is different for me when I watch the fall tape on him is that he does at least try to throw his bag of bones in the pile, and will try to be a little bit more aggressive than maybe he was the year before.
I think it's all very fair, and why, I don't think he's getting talked about as the top actual corner in this class. Why I said just like pure cover wise, I think he's the best. And I think in today's NFL, that's getting more important to the guys, corner's ability to play the run, corner's ability to tackle, because man coverage is kind of at an all-time low. People are just scared to play it with how many explosive plays you can create. So I do think there are knocks, and he won't be for everyone, but teams that do play a good deal man, I think are still going to be looking at this guy as, a first-round pick.
I hesitate to ask you, Mike, but do you have a comp for Mr. Wiggins? I have one, and Rick has come around in my comps, but I still have moments that get him fired up.
I don't have one that I like. And usually if I don't like a comp, I don't try to throw one out there and force it. So unfortunately, don't have a good one for him.
Oh, that's okay. I like to force comps because Rick has a squeeze ball, you'll notice, and he goes through 3 or 4 on every podcast. But Rick, it is interesting you mentioned Kyer Elam, because my comp over the summer, and I haven't gone back and sort of recomp them. And my summer comps, admittedly, were not great, but you said shoot for the moon. So my comp for Nate over the summer, and you got to squint a little bit. You got your squeeze ball ready? Christian Gonzalez. Oh, he didn't like that one. But my comp for Kyer Elam for Christian Gonzalez was Kyer Elam. They're closer in size than Nate. Nate's a little slighter of frame, but in terms of the questions about the tackling and all that. So maybe he's closer to Christian as a year 1 player than Kyer.
Perfect. You did a fine job on that comparison. I'm not going to disagree with you. We have a guest on today, so we have to behave. It's like when people come over to your house.
Yeah.
Like my wife had people over at the house the other day. Don't act up like you normally act up, is what she tells me. Try to be halfway civilized. So
Mike is considerably younger than we are, but Sebastian Maniscalco has a bit where it used to be called Company. Remember that? The Company's coming over?
No.
Like that was a thing? You didn't have that?
No.
All right. He can see how he's a great straight man, Mike. All right, next up, another guy that both I think, Rick, you like this guy too. He's a little older, injury concerns, but he's got a fantastic college career, had a good Senior Bowl. Linebacker, but he can line up just about anywhere. Peyton Wilson at NC State.
Yeah, I watched his tape this year, and it's like this whole linebacker class. And to me, he has the most complete skill set in terms of do it all, what he wants to do. I think probably the biggest weakness of his game is maybe take on skills. He likes to play round blocks more than he likes to actually go through blocks. But everything about the position, whether it's drop deep in coverage, whether it's play downhill as a linebacker, whether it's split out and maybe guard a slot receiver if you're in an unfavorable situation, I think he could do all of that. It's just, can he stay healthy? Because 2 ACLs now, 2 dislocated shoulders, 6 years of college football, a lot kind of riding on that in terms of his medicals that Rick can probably speak more to. I don't know exactly the whole process that goes on there with those, but as an athlete, I think he could run in like the 4.4s. I saw him track down wide receivers on tape from behind at multiple times this past season. When he ranges sideline to sideline, he just goes with no fear in his game. So just, I think in a linebacker class and a linebacker position in the NFL now, where pretty much you have to be a high-end athlete to go anywhere near highly, I think he should test pretty well and move himself up.
So, Rick, what are you thinking about Peyton just because of the age and the injury concerns? And when you think about someone like Ivan Pace Jr. last year, who went undrafted and was a green dot guy from pretty much day one, how does that figure into where you're going to stack this guy?
Yeah, well, just to clarify what green dot means, just for people out there that listen, that's the guy that the signal or the defensive call comes in, and that's rare for a rookie. But for the Vikings, that Pace Ivan Pace Jr. was the green dot guy, where he made all the calls and adjustments, which is incredible, especially since he was a college free agent. But this will be the biggest thing on this linebacker, will be the medical. The age is a little bit of a concern. When you get to 26, we would put an age alert on him. The medical and the durability, and he'll get lit up like a Christmas tree with every MRI and the entire area of Indiana, because they'll have 150 MRI machines going, and he'll be in 149 of them, just to make sure, because when you're a little older and you have the injuries that he's had, a lot of times I would put the doctors on, what's the best way to put it? I would put the onus on them. So we like this player. I agree with everything that you said, that he has range, he has speed. I wish he took on a little better with his hands, but most of these linebackers coming out don't know how to use their hands. But sideline to sideline, this guy's a run and hit guy, and he surprised me with some of his athleticism in coverage. But if I'd say the doc, okay, if we draft this guy, how many years are we going to get out of him? So that may be determined on the medical. That may be determined on how well the surgeries went. It didn't look like it affected him at all this year. But if he has bad knees or something where he already has some degeneration, he may have a shorter career. So let's say the doctor comes back and says, maybe you can get 3, maybe you can get him through his first contract. So the question is, from a team standpoint, recognize him and what he is as a player, but he's 26 by the time we develop him. And usually linebackers can make an impact, especially if they're smart, just like we seen Ryan point out, Ivan Pace Jr. But by 28, 29 years old, those linebackers are starting to get a little long in the tooth. And the biggest question will be the longevity of his career with all the injuries that he has. And that has to be answered at the combine.
Medicals, the doctors come back, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. You going to take him late day 2, or is that too rich?
No, I think he's a Friday talent.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't have any question, because I don't think this is a great linebacker class in general. Right. So if you need one, this guy a little bit like a Drew Tranquil that came out when he came out of Notre Dame. Though I think this guy's a little faster, a little better athlete than Drew was when he came out. So, but this will all depend. If he is, some teams may just take him off the board. So if you see a guy, you see, well, God, he's a Friday talent, but why is he still sitting there on Saturday? It's less of a financial risk if you take a swing at him on Saturday than you do on Friday.
All right. Yeah, he had a fantastic career, but it was certainly a long one because of the injuries. Next up, Mike, this is one of I don't know if it's one of your sleepers, Rick, but you certainly like this guy. Austin Booker out of Kansas, defensive end. Another guy who I thought had a pretty good Senior Bowl, solid season, played mostly outside. I think that's where his future is going to lie. What'd you like about Austin?
Yeah, I'm unreasonably high on this guy. I think, in my opinion, he's like a top 50 player in this class. Outside of like the top 3 edge rushers that I think will go in the first round, that everyone's kind of projecting there, though, Latu from UCLA, Verse from Florida State, and Turner from Alabama. If I had to like pick one guy to be, a Pro Bowl caliber pass rusher, it would be him, just because the traits are off the charts with this guy. He's 6'4", 240, 34-inch arms, but he's really barely played any football. I think 505 snaps in his entire career. Started his career at Minnesota, just like didn't play in Minnesota. I don't know why, but didn't play at Minnesota. Goes to Kansas last year, and the high end with him is so high in terms of the twitch getting off the line of scrimmage, his ability to just make tackles miss in short areas, and then the bend. And then he plays with violence, even though he's not necessarily strong. To me, you asked for a comp earlier. I have a comp for him, and it's Max Crosby coming out of Eastern Michigan, where Crosby was skinny as can be coming out of Eastern Michigan. Like that was, I remember Mike Mayock told him on the phone after he got drafted to go hit the weight room or whatever, because he just needed that play strength to turn into the player he is today. To me, that's like what I see with Austin Booker is just, can he get stronger? Will he get stronger? And if he does, I think the sky is the limit. And because you see him throw a bunch of moves out on tape, he just needs some refinement with them. It's not that he can't do it. It's just that he's not necessarily has the practice because he's barely played a lot of football. So I think he's just a heck of an athlete that probably will show it at the combine in Indy.
Hey, let me ask you this, Rick, and you can grade plus or minus if you want. the Max Crosby comp. I like it in the sense that coming out, Max wasn't very strong. Like I remember thinking, oh my gosh, he's getting ragdolled. And what's the math that you do when you're looking at a prospect trying to figure out how much weight they can add? Is that just looking at their frame and having a feel for it? Is that working out? Like, how do you understand what that might look like in 2 or 3 years? Because no one thought Max Crosby was going to be Max Crosby coming out of Eastern Michigan, I wouldn't imagine.
Yeah, no, we'd have our strength coaches and sports science people look at his frame to see if they can add strength and bulk to it. We put a B alert on him, means that he could probably add 10 pounds, maybe 15, without losing his athleticism or speed. If it was a frame or an F alert for us, that means he was pretty maxed out, that he's not going to be able to add anything, that what you see is what you get from a body type standpoint. But this kid was intriguing for me to watch. I think he is still rawer than, well, he's just very raw. I think he needs to get stronger, definitely in the run game. There's a couple of times that he likes to hop around blocks and use his athleticism to try to beat blockers at the point. But a few times, if the guys get their hands on him, he was toast. But you can see the bend and the burst and the athleticism coming off the edge, the first step quickness. We used to fall in love with guys like this. Daniil Hunter was a little bit like this when he came out. We got him in the 3rd round. The DJ Wanhams of the world, who came out of South Carolina, was, a little bit like this, long, linear, athletic, that we would say, and our defensive line coach at the time, that's with the Giants now, Andre Patterson, was excellent at taking and molding these guys into pretty good edge rushers. So,
hey, Rick, let me ask you this. What were their grades in terms of their build? Did you feel like you could put more weight on them or no?
Yeah, we would put a B on them, that we
Okay.
would be able to add. We would be able to bulk. And so I haven't seen this kid's body in person, but most of the time our strength coaches would write up a report on, this guy can put on X amount of weight without losing his athleticism and his explosiveness. So this kid to me is a borderline 4th round, 3rd round, but his ceiling may be as high as anyone. And I agree with you, Mike. This guy has a lot of natural tools to work with, but it may take a year or so before he can put all the pieces together. We did that, like I said. You saw DJ Wanham start coming on and play really well this year. Daniil didn't play a lot. He rotated in as a rookie, and then he came along. So this guy kind of fit the mold when I watched him on some of these raw, long, athletic guys that you can shape, and they end up being pretty good players in the league. If he would have stayed in one more year, he would have probably been a 1st rounder, and I think would have made a lot more money if he would have came back one more year.
Well, following up on that, then that sort of brings us back to what Mike's saying, a top 50 guy. If you know that, if you're sitting there in the draft room and you say if he'd stayed in a year, do you have those conversations or no?
No, I just think that he's a year away. I think he'll be a rotational, help someone next year as a rookie, but I think he's still a year or 2 away before he's an impact guy. So I don't know. Usually if a 1st rounder, you're going to take someone in the 1st round in the top 50, you want them to come in and have an impact immediately. You're betting on to come on this kid. And if everything checks out where he loves ball, and I don't have any question about his effort and energy that he plays with, because he does play hard. So that is a big plus with that raw athleticism. And it seems, at least like the tapes that I watched, that this guy likes to play football.
All right. I don't know if you want to say this part out loud, but I'll ask you. Does it make more sense for a Booker, for example, to come out early and learn in an NFL organization, or to stay for another year and perhaps not progress as much as he might under some NFL coaching?
The difference between a 1st round is millions and millions of dollars.
No, I get that part. Yeah.
Never make up. So, And I think that, if he would have stayed in, he would have made, even though, let's say, becomes a great player and gets a big 2nd year contract extension, you'll never make up those millions you lost coming out early.
Yeah, he'll make it up on the back end when he does a podcast. You know how that works.
Yeah, no, this one pays dividends, believe me.
All right, next up. So far, so good, Mike. Rick has had no complaints, and I think he likes all the players on your list so far. We'll see if this changes. Rick and I haven't talked about this guy yet. We've talked about his teammate Joe Alt, the left tackle, but the other side, Blake Fisher, right tackle out of Notre Dame, really good athlete, enormous frame, moves well for his size. This is a question I often ask. I don't know what there's not to like about Blake Fisher.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's not my guy.
You're just chomping at the bit. You want to get in.
Go ahead.
Oh, Rick.
I've obviously followed his career very closely. He was a guy who was more highly recruited than Joe Alt was, started over him as a true freshman at left tackle. Then he got hurt that year. And sophomore year, I thought he was great for a sophomore. I was like, okay, this guy's kind of on the trajectory to go top 10 pick, kind of what we're seeing with Joe Alt right now. I thought this was like Ronnie Stanley, Mike McGlinchey 2.0 here with what they had at Notre Dame. And then this past year, I didn't see a step forward. Now they lost their offensive line coach, and gosh, I'm blanking on the name right now of who it was, but he just never saw that next step in his development. So that's why he's not getting talked about as a first rounder, but the athletic traits in terms of movement skills, explosiveness off the line of scrimmage, how he can mirror, it might honestly be better than Alt's. He just does not use his hands well. I kind of have some balance concerns with him on tape and how he can recover blocks compared to Alt on tape. And then, but projects at offensive tackle, there's only, good Lord only made so many guys that can be 6'5" plus with 34 inch plus arms and can move the way he does. So you'll still go fairly highly in the draft, but I do think that the combine testing for offensive tackle, specifically when I see short shuttle times for them, I think it's very important to kind of differentiate between those linear athletes at offensive line that may look good on tape in a straight line, getting guys, digging them out in the run game, between the guys who are actually able to mirror NFL edge rushers at a high level. And so I trend towards the guys who have those quick short shuttle times. So hopefully Blake Fisher is one of those.
Go ahead, Rick. Tee it up. What do you got?
Well, I may disagree on some things in this one. I love the size, the athleticism, the arm length. I think he is a physical run blocker, at least tries to be. I think he gets out of control and off balance at times just because he's almost overly aggressive. Where I had an issue, and maybe I got to go back and do more tape, was in the Louisville game. I think he got benched that game. He gave up a sack. I think he gave up a strip sack. He just didn't seem, I don't know if it was some kind of instinctual thing or why and I didn't see the earlier tape, Mike, you talked about, so through his career, so I'll have to go back and look at it, but I really thought it was maybe a lack of instinctual awareness, trying to mirror, and some of the things he did in pass protection. So I had some struggles there. The guy that I thought he reminded me of that had all the same things and we missed on him was who the heck, the upright offensive tackle that came out of Pitt, TJ Cunningham.
TJ Clemmings.
TJ Clemmings.
There
He
you go.
had some TJ.
That's
Clemmings.
a great comp.
Huh?
When did you take him?
Yeah.
What round? Do you remember? Fourth round. Okay.
2015.
Yep. Do you remember him?
Yeah. I was higher on Clemmings too, actually, but I'm not actually that high on Blake Fisher. I don't. When I'm that close to Notre Dame guys, usually it's either I love them or I hate them because they were not good. And Blake Fisher, I was like, why wasn't he better this year? And like you said, that Louisville game was tough. That was like a big reason why they lost that game. So, yeah, I'm not actually high on him. I just do think, as for his own sake, as a guy who's young coming out, he came out early, not even 21 years old yet. He better test well, or else he might not go until late day 3.
Interesting. Okay, so possibly late day 3. Rick, where do you like him?
I think he's a Saturday guy in my opinion right now. We'll see.
Right, I had him a late day 2 guy because of the physicality, and I think he's a pretty good athlete for his size, and I think he's young. And the question is, and you talk about this all the time, you got to talk to the position coach and figure out if you can coach him up, and that's the first part of the conversation after you watch the tape together, right?
Yeah, there was something in his C to do that bothered me a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I just have that Louisville game in my head. I'm too hard on him. But I've seen some TJ Clemmings in him.
You may not want to talk about this, but how long into the process did you realize that TJ wasn't the player you thought he was?
Well, it wasn't because of length, athleticism. He was actually a pretty good run blocker. It was just some of the whatever C to do or the things putting together in pass protection.
Yeah.
So then he slid inside the guard. I think he went on and played a couple of years at some other places and bounced around for about 5 or 6 years. This guy's more than, will make it. I just don't know if he's going to be a solid 17 game starter year in and year out yet.
Okay. All right. That's why we talk about him. All right. Next up, final guy on Mike's list is a running back. We haven't talked a lot about running backs. It feels like that's the last thing we get to, perhaps unfairly. But what's that?
You don't like running backs.
I have admitted, and this is going to come up in momentarily, I struggle to sort of figure out where these guys end up on draft boards. It's one of my many weak spots Rick will attest to. But Jalen Wright, the running back out of Tennessee, he's the last guy on your list. He's not a return guy. I'm laughing, and then you can get into this, Mike. I said he has Tevin Coleman like long legs and a high waist. That was my first observation when watching him. Rick will probably hate that. That's not the comp, Rick. That's just the first thing that popped into my Rolodex. But what do you got on Jalen Wright?
Well, I think you haven't talked about running backs. It's a bad running back class. There's just not a lot of guys to talk about in this class that are exciting. And so I think he can make himself some money because when there is just not a lot of talent at the position, I think teams would trend more towards the guys with high-end athleticism. And Wright is probably going to be the most explosive running back in this class. At least on tape, he looks like the most explosive. He's still young, still only 20 years old. Good size, 5'11", 210. Nothing like special in that regard, but like adequate. And when he was out in the open field, he just accelerates so easily, whether it's, bouncing runs out to the outside, which he, in that Tennessee offense does a lot because it's kind of a joke in terms of the concepts they're running compared to what they're going to be running in the NFL. But you just see game-changing, angle-breaking type of speed in his game. He had a run against Georgia where he had Kamari Lassiter, who's probably a day 2 cornerback, and Javon Bullard, who's probably a day 2 safety. He had them, they were further downfield than he was, and he ran past both of those guys. So that's just something that, again, in a weak running back class, I think could really boost his stock to kind of near the front of the pack if he tests off the charts.
What do you think, Rick?
Yeah, I actually like this kid a little bit. I was hoping he'd show up at the Senior Bowl, but I think he was invited but didn't show up down there because I do think for a bigger back, this guy can really run. I think he's got good vision in line. The only thing that if I'm going to pick some holes in him is that once he gets in the open field, he's going to try to outrun angles. He's not a stop-start type guy that's going to make you elude, but he's going to lower his shoulder and try to run through you at the second level, which I liked his aggressiveness there. I think he has good enough hands. I don't know how exceptional his hands are. I was at the Alabama game live. He had like 7 catches that game, but they were all swings and checkdowns towards the end of the game. I think Missouri had 1 drop in the Missouri game, but I don't know how good his hands are. I think that'd be something that can be answered at the combine. And I actually liked him. I watched his pass protection. He'll step up. He's not afraid to put his face in there. The biggest negative probably is I don't know how quickly he recognizes where the blitzes are coming at times. Sometimes, and maybe it's the offense, he gets caught up in the trash, or sometimes he was late finding a blitzer coming if that was a linebacker coming through opposite side. I don't know if he recognized that all the time. So I'm sure teams are going to try to sift through that to see if it's an intelligence thing or what the protection was and why he missed the protection here or there. But he's more than willing to step up and do that. So this guy was a little bit intriguing to me as well.
How intriguing draft day wise?
Oh, I think he could be a fry. If he runs in a 4th, I think he may run in a 4.3s.
Whoa. Okay.
I'm going to say that he is below 4.40. So I'll bet you $1 since you're down $150 already.
We have these dollar bets going, and Mike, you're more than welcome to get in on these dollar bets because I'm
going to say he's at 4.40 or lower.
Jeez, pizza. All right, that's a bold prediction. Save that for next week. All right, Debo, write that down so I can make myself $1. That's a moving. Do you see sub 4.4 speed, Mike?
I think so. I mean,
who
was it? We had Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker ran sub 4.4. And
that's
to me,
true.
He looks faster than those guys on tape. So that's obviously not, it doesn't always translate that way, but I do think he's in that range.
I should have known that Rick already knew something because he's the most cautious gambler I've ever met. All right. Thank you, Rick, for that. All right. We're going to take a quick break. How would you grade Mike's 5 guys, Rick? I thought they were pretty good.
A++. Except for Fisher, the right tackle from Notre Dame.
I used to grade your drafts. Now you're grading mine. That's a bit.
Yeah, because I don't get fired grading drafts now.
Well, you're gonna grade Rick's draft after the break, Mike, because we're gonna go through Rick's 5 right after this.
The madness doesn't just happen.
Yo, get ready!
And although it's marked on our calendars each year, it's built by moments of mayhem before.
And the crowd goes crazy!
And it begins to bubble long before it bursts. Sure, madness and March may go hand in hand, but it starts right here.
All right, Rick, you're on the old hot seat here. I give Mike a lot of credit for going into some deep dives. I have some names that we haven't talked about, and you like to accuse me of low-hanging fruit. This feels like the fruit's already fell off the tree and on the ground, and you just picked it up and started eating apples with these guys.
Yeah. No, well, I because I had spent so much time digging through the lower level guys that you put on this list.
How dare you, sir.
Got a lot to talk about. So
How dare you? Wait till you see what the grades I have on those guys that we're going to talk about.
wait.
All right, first up, Leatu Latu. He was actually at the Senior Bowl, which made Rick very happy. He competed the first 2 days of practice, had his leg wrapped on day 3, but hopefully he's okay. But he was dominant in the one-on-one drills and a lot of fun to watch. Looked like his tape during the fall. And Rick, we talk about it all the time. The only issues are medical, I would imagine.
Yeah, the only reason I put him on here is because of the medical at the combine.
Okay.
Because I think he's one of the top edge rushers. There's no question about that. To me, he is the best edge rusher using his hands as far as not getting locked on and knowing how to swipe an offensive tackle's arms away when he gets trying to get locked on. He's got natural bend. I don't have any question about this guy's football, and you can call it low-hanging fruit, but it'll be interesting to see if anyone takes him off the board at the combine because of his medical. And there may be some teams that with that neck, depending on how the neck is, if they pass him or not. So it's not the player's ability. He's a first-round talent. It is this guy's medical, and if he will stay on boards or actually get rejected off boards once he gets through the medicals at the combine.
Why would some teams pass him and other teams? I mean, the obvious answer is they have different levels of what's serious and what isn't, but it feels like if the doctor says something, the doctor says something.
It's doctors are just like, like Mike, just so you know, I'm just a scout in the corner here. I just wait till I get called upon to give an opinion. And then Brian does what he wants to do. So I try to, throw in my 2 cents if I can help him out any way I can.
Thank you.
But I would say, depending on the doctors, and it is still subjective, some doctors will say, we don't want to take a risk on this guy because if he does injure his neck and his career ending, then you just wasted a first-round pick. And, you got workers' comp, you got how much money you got tied up into this with the guaranteed monies and things like that that could affect your future going forward. But my big, if he gets selected in the first round, or if you have him in that first round, I'm telling my doctors right now, I'm looking at him, is this guy pass or not? Because if he doesn't, we're not going to take him in the first round. We'll put him in a box. And if he is completely a fail, then we're taking him off the board and wouldn't take him no matter what round or even as a college free agent. But I always left that determination up to what our doctors said. I'm not a doctor, although I do play one on this podcast every now and then.
And a soon-to-be Hallmark movie. We're looking for that too. Mike, what are your thoughts on Latu? Because I think, Rick's exactly right. He's a special talent and feels like a top 15 pick if he's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, he feels like he's like a third-year NFL veteran already. And it kind of is, right? Because his career got derailed by that injury. And so he's more developed than most pass rushers who are as talented as him because he stayed 5 years when, realistically would not have stayed 5 years if it weren't for that neck injury. So I'm curious, though, Rick, were you with the Vikings still when Jalen Phillips was coming out? And if you had like because he had the same, Jalen Phillips, coming out of Miami had like the same thing where he had to medically retire. And then obviously I was wondering if like his medicals did teams have him off boards for him to fall all the way down to, I think it was 18 that year.
I'm kind of offended, Mike. We haven't gotten fired. I got fired 2 years ago. But
okay, that's what I thought. I thought you were. I was just making sure.
I know the exact date. So.
January 10th. You got fired this January 10th too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still active in the NFL, trying to evaluate talent. But our guys did not have as big a concern when he came out, where he was not off of our board for medical. But I know when they go through those pods at the physicals. Each team's doctors will look at it, and he'll get MRI'd and neck specialists and everything from A to Z. And some doctors will just tell you, no, we don't want to mess with this, or hey, if he's that good a player, let's take a swing at him.
You have a Rolodex for Latu? I got one. You're not gonna like it, but I don't care.
Go ahead.
And you know this young man quite well. I think he's an amped up version, maybe not in terms of edge wise, in terms of the way he walks around day to day, but I think he's a better player coming out than Jermaine Johnson.
I agree. He's more fluid.
That's called a victory, Mike. We'll take that. In the comp world, that's called a victory. All right. Top 15, right, Rick, if he's healthy?
Yes, if he's healthy. But if he falls to Friday, a lot of teams flunked him.
Yeah. I mean, Montez Sweat went bottom of the one. BJ Ojolari lasted till day 2 because of the knee. Aziz, excuse me. BJ lasted day 2, but he had a good rookie season as well. All right, next up, Terry Arnold, a guy that I didn't watch the last week because I thought he was coming back. That didn't happen. He is my CB 1.5, Rick. How does that make you feel?
That's good because I think this will be the way Quinyon Williams or Mitchell had at the Senior Bowl really put him up there as maybe the top corner off. So why I put this kid on the list is he was very raw. He could play inside and outside. He's best in man coverage. Did not play very well at the game I was at. Got hurt in the Tennessee game. I think he had a concussion. But after they came out of that bye, this kid may have been the best corner in college football. I think he had 4 or 5 picks down the stretch. A couple of them were gimmies, but he did make the plays. I think one of these guys whose ceiling is so high where he's haven't even tapped his potential yet. But he finished the season very, very strong. I think he had like 17 or 18 pass breakups. He has natural ball skills. This guy is an Alabama corner that's not as beat up as some of those corners that come out of Alabama. And he just has maybe the highest upside out of any corner in this year's draft because of the speed, the athleticism, and how he improved through the year.
Our buddy, Lige Douzable, we work with, asked me this the other day, and I'm not sure. He said he looked undersized to him. He's normal height and weight for a cornerback. He's not undersized, is he?
Oh, he's not undersized.
Okay. What are your thoughts, Mike, on Terrion? Because he did have a special year, especially second half of the season.
To me, he reminds me of Trent McDuffie coming out of Washington. Ooh. And I would love for him to go and play nickel like McDuffie does, or, like Witherspoon last year. I think that's a valuable position in today's NFL. And because he can do it so well, he's such a good, all the things we said that were bad about Nate Wiggins, like he does them exceptionally well. He's so good in run support. He's so good at taking on those blocks on those wide screens. He's physical, great tackler. So yeah, I think he's like a ready-made NFL starter, even though he, really only started at Alabama for 1 year. I do think he is probably the most complete corner in this class.
Hey, Rick, let me ask you this. Playing in the SEC against those SEC receivers, Malik Neighbors, Ladd McConkey, my guy, Tavion Robinson out of Kentucky, comparing that to Quinyon Mitchell's tape and knowing Quinyon went down to the Senior Bowl and was as dominant as you could be, how do you balance those two things out, knowing the level of competition has been mostly different?
I think there'll be a lot of group studies because I think there's 4 or 5 corners that are potential going the first round, but everybody may have it different according to what type of scheme that they play. So this is going to be one of the most intriguing positions in the draft, in my opinion, on who goes where and when. And a lot of it may be predicated on the team's scheme fit. And Mike, like you said, Wiggins may be the top corner for someone that plays all man coverage, where DeJean may be the top corner for someone who can play nick, corner, safety, and play more zone type coverage. So this one's different because I think a lot will depend on how these guys come off the board based on the scheme that the team that drafts them is running. All
right, next up, a guy we spent a lot of time talking about.
Make some good points for just a scout in the corner.
No, well, you have a little experience. I'll give you that. You do make good points, and you are on your best behavior, which we should have Mike on every podcast because this is like easy breezy. All right, this next one, Mike, is a quarterback, and I'll just ask you.
I just put him on to irritate Ryan because he's going to talk about a quarterback that irritates me to death. So I just countered with his counter.
who you admitted that you were coming around on at the Senior Bowl. I'll just leave it at that. Mike, I'll ask you before we get to Rick. Explain to me why J.J. McCarthy's the top 10 pick.
Tools, man. I mean, he moves so well in the pocket. I think he has the best pocket presence of any of the quarterbacks in this class in terms of just being able to operate from tight quarters. And that's, massively important when projected into the NFL, right? If a guy can handle that at the collegiate level, the learning curve you think is going to be fairly slim for him compared to maybe some other guys in this draft class where it's going to be an eye-opening experience when they get to NFL pockets. So I think that's the biggest thing. The other thing is that, like, while he didn't drop back to pass a ton, it was really all drop back passing concepts when he does drop back to pass. So he's not, throwing pop passes, screens the way maybe Bo Nix is. When the offense looks way different than like what Caleb Williams is running at USC. So it's very NFL translatable, pretty much everything he does on tape. Now, I may not draft him in the top 10 personally. I obviously won't draft him personally. I'm not an NFL GM, but I do think there's a lot to like about this guy physically. I do just worry that, like, why was he never kind of given the keys to that offense? Why was he never, you have Jim Harbaugh, who's one of the best coaches at collegiate NFL level, whatever. And they really never kind of turned the keys over to him and said, hey, this is your, go win us games. That probably to me is probably one of the things where I'm like, it's a little interesting. And then also he throws lasers. Only he's got one speed, but there is a lot to like about his game.
So Rick, Colin Kaepernick, Alex Smith, Harbaugh shows up and turns those guys around pretty quickly. To Mike's point, why not allow JJ to do those things?
Well, see, Mike, Ryan has him going in the 4th round. So,
oof, tough crowd.
Not the 4th. Stop it.
Well, he does. He's my number 4 quarterback. I agree with a lot of things that you said. But the one thing is I went back and like I said, the game that sticks out to me the most, there are 2 games. This year, or last year, was the TCU game where you actually seen him throw the ball 30, 40 times in that game. It was a shootout, and he made every throw possible in the NFL. Accuracy, arm talent, everything. This year, they won games differently. And so Ryan's going to discredit this guy because they didn't ask him to throw the ball against Penn State when they were running it down their throats 62 times in the second half to win the game. So I think they ended up winning a national championship. I think this guy, lost 1 game since he started playing at the University of Michigan. And I think when they do let him go or take the reins off him, he has the ability to do that. The only question is he just has to make better decisions at times, because sometimes, like all these quarterbacks, he has a tendency to force it. And my favorite saying that I came up with, and I'll pat myself on the back, was the Bowling Green game where he threw 3 interceptions and the Bowling Green Falcons. And I said that was just unfalcon believable what I was watching on tape. So.
I love it when you set up your own jokes. All right, Rick, I'm the owner. I'm coming to you. You have 4 guys as your first round grades on quarterback. And I'm like, all right, Rick, why you have to sell me on taking this guy top 15? Like, how do I know that is he playing year 1, number 1? And how long do I have to wait for him to be a star?
Well, then I just lay out why. What do you want me to say? I said,
that's how you're going to talk to the owner?
Huh?
That's how you're going to talk to me if I'm the owner?
Yeah. Well, Debo, I talked to Debo, and he's the owner of this podcast. He's like the owner.
You do talk to Debo that way. All right. So you're taking him top 15 and you're starting him day 1 is what I'm hearing.
I think that depending on what my quarterback situation is, I don't think any of these guys literally are ready to start day 1 when they come in the league. CJ, we talked about it, and I know for a fact that CJ, they gave him too much actually in the first game, and they actually ended up paring it back. So if he is going to be your day 1 starter, then you better have a plan and how you're going to feed him, not all with a fire hose, but hey, this is what we're going to do first, and let's continue to build through the season to give him the best chance to have success.
In retrospect, you think it probably would have made more sense to let Andy Dalton start over Bryce?
No, well, they gave away all that draft capital, had the number 1 pick, but they had no help around him whatsoever. So
this is a big Bryce Young podcast, pro podcast.
Me too.
Oh, there you go. There's
yeah.
3 of us, Rick. We found us. All right. It's going to work out for him. All right. Next up, Rick. This is a young man we talked about very early in the fall because he had a great start to his final season at Minnesota. Safety Tyler Newman is we haven't talked a lot about safeties on this podcast either. So little Cam Kitchens conversations here and there. Javon Bullard, if you want to call him a safety, he's more of a Nick. Tyler Newman, Rick, Minnesota.
Yeah, I really like this kid as a football player. I think he comes up and run support. I think he has to play things in front of him. I think he has excellent ball instincts and awareness to make plays. I think he is just a fun football player to watch on tape. If I have to poke a hole in this guy, I think he's a little tight in his hips. And I think if he gets stretched vertically and has to turn and run, I don't know what his recovery speed is. That's why I'm anxious to see what he runs at the combine. But I thought from an instinctual standpoint for the position, he was one of the guys that had the best instincts as a safety in this year's draft.
He doesn't sneak in around 1, does he, or does he?
I think he's a 2, second round.
Okay. No. You would hear my comp, or would that make you angry?
No, it doesn't make me angry. I'm over that in my life.
We'll see when I say these next 2 words. And this is back from the fall. I haven't gone back and recalibrated. Jesse Bates.
Jesse Bates was more athletic. Jesse Bates did not run support like this guy did when he came out of Wake Forest.
Oh, Tyler's better in run support?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, you didn't just yell and scream, so I'll take that.
No, it's just asinine comparison because
there it is. There it is.
I
thought you said you didn't mind my comps.
I don't.
Any thoughts on Tyler?
Yeah, I really like what you said there about he has to play things in front of him. I think that's when he's at his best. And I look at like all his best plays, and it's him either like driving down from quarters or being like a robber and just seeing something in front of him and like going and attacking it with, like you said, the instincts to like know where it's coming before it gets there. But I not only want to see like his 40, but I think his cone and shuttle, because I have questions about his change of direction in space as well. So, for higher cut safeties like that, taller guys, it's just harder for them to play out in space the way. That's why like Kyle Hamilton's a unicorn in that regard. So definitely think that if he ticks those boxes, he could be the first safety off the board.
Kyle Hamilton's another great example, along with Brian Branch, of guys who didn't torch it in terms of their 40 times, and we'd let that affect their draft status. I don't think we're ever going to learn that lesson. We talk about it every year. But I think after this combine, if someone runs too fast or too slow, it's going to affect our opinions. I'm just being honest, Rick. Next up, I'll take that as an agreement. Your final guy, Trey Benson. Injury history, but he's electric. You wouldn't know he's injured to watch him play. Like he ever suffered an injury the way he plays. I think if he's healthy, does he have an opportunity to get into day 2?
Yeah, I think he does. And
okay.
I really thought this kid played well this year. I think at Oregon in 2020, he had maybe the worst knee injury that a running back could ever have. I mean, tore every ligament. I think he tore part of his hamstring. I was surprised this kid even is playing football. I saw something similar with Teddy Bridgewater when his knee exploded when I was in Minnesota. Mike, I was actually there for a while. So just in case you can Google it. They got this machine. You can actually look things up on this machine.
I need to do that next time. Just try to figure out how to use that.
Oh my gosh.
But this kid, I was shocked at the severity of the injury and how well he plays, because he's another violent runner. He has speed in the open field. He can catch the ball out of the back. I had a hard time poking a lot of holes in this guy's game. And I thought he may be running back 1 coming off the board if his medical checks out. But to me, I fell in love with the kid because of the severity of the injury, transferring from Oregon down to Florida State, and overcoming all that adversity to play how he played this year. I thought was pretty phenomenal.
So he is or he isn't your RB1?
I think if he runs fast, which I think he's going to do, I don't think he's as fast as Jalen, right? But I think he's going to be right up there next to him in the 4.4s when he runs.
He's my running back 2 right now, and the running back 1 is currently on the mend from an ACL, Jonathan Brooks. We haven't talked about him, and we can talk about him later. So I don't know how you guys feel about Jonathan, but I liked his tape, but unfortunately he got hurt. All right, Rick, those are your 5 guys. You gave Micah A++. I'll give you an A+.
I don't want an A+.
All right. Well, is that what you told your folks when you came on your report card? I wasn't trying to get an A+.
No, yeah, I don't do pluses and minuses. That seems to irritate people that listen to this podcast.
Mike, I'll tell you a quick story. Last Thursday, we did a top 10 mock draft where every pick had to be traded, and producer Debo had one rule. Rick, don't complain because people get angry. You complain. So he complains for the first 20 seconds, and the top 10 comments are people saying, "Well, Rick, please shut up about the complaining and just do the exercise."
Complain about the complaining.
Some people enjoyed your surly demeanor, Rick. So there's that. All right, take a quick break, and Rick, we're going to get to what we all came for. My 5 picks, and
Oh boy, here we go.
Hear your thoughts on these guys right after this.
Wake up to football highlights and news from around the world with the one and only Morning Footy team.
Rise and shine, football fans. Welcome to Morning Footy.
Start your all-day football craze with Morning Footy, part of the all-new Golazo Network.
All right, we'll rip through these guys in like 15 minutes so we can get out of here. Because I'm sure, Rick, you'll have all thumbs up on these, so I'll just be interested in Mike's thoughts. First up, Amarius Mims, right tackle out of Georgia. Sort of burst onto the scene after the 2022 season in that matchup against Ohio State. Was forced into duty. Only played 7 games last season because of a ankle injury, I believe is what kept him out most of the time. He rolled it up in the South Carolina game. But for someone that size to move the way he does is freakish in the best sense of the word. And I think if he's healthy, Rick, he feels like a top 15 guy, maybe higher. The issue, of course, is the health. But I don't think there are guys outside of Fashanu who probably move like that at that size. And the more I watch him, the more I like him. The issue is there isn't a lot to watch.
Well, ask Mike. Yeah. All
right. Yeah, that's a good point. Mike, let's give me some positives, and then we can go to negative Nancy after you.
I'm right there with you. I have him as OT3 behind Alton Fashanu. I think, and I trend away from guys who usually haven't played a ton of football, because you didn't have ever a full year as a starter, only 803 career snaps. But when I just watch him as an athlete, and to me, he's very technically sound for a guy who hasn't played a lot of football, like how he, his set depth, consistency, his hand usage, and his body posture is all great in pass protection. So I think there's a lot to like from there, but obviously it's going to take a while because he just hasn't played a ton of football. The guy needs the reps, but it really is all there for him to not only be, good starter at the next level. He could be Pro Bowl, All Pro type of guy with what he has physically.
Hey, Rick, is he better than Broderick Jones coming out? Just
Yes.
in terms of football? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, out the 2 plays I watched him.
Two great plays, though.
Yeah, it was 2 great plays. You guys are better evaluators than me. I'd like to see more body of work. I recognize the athleticism, the length, the flashes, but this guy's always hurt. I don't think he's ever made it through a season, and that's my biggest concern is what makes that history different when he gets to the NFL.
In his defense, he was on the depth chart in 2022 and forced into duty and played really well in the Ohio State game. And just last year, the one year he only played 7 games because of the ankle. I don't know if you have these conversations with your trainers and your doctors. I would imagine you prefer ankle injuries to torn ligaments in your knee and shoulders.
That depends.
Okay. Thank you for that. All right, next up, one of my favorite players in this class. I've been talking him up since the summertime, and we have to get you back on to talk about our guy Riley Leonard. I was a huge Riley Leonard guy over the summer. He's now at Notre Dame, Mike. So Rick never came around on Riley. He'll come around on Riley. I'm not worried about that. But he is coming around on Spencer Rattler, and he very quietly said on the podcast on Thursday's practice, after Thursday's practice in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, Spencer had a good week. So he's 6 feet. He can throw the ball through a wall. Rick's issue is a fair one, late game decision making. But I always counter with he had no choice because the offensive line stunk and they had Xavier Legette, no one else because everyone else was hurt. Where are you on Spencer?
I see him as a day 3 guy. I just think he's played enough football at this point to kind of know that I don't think he's a high-end processor. I think that's why he was benched at Oklahoma. That's why it never really turned into just high-end production at South Carolina with all the tools.
All right,
in the
Mike,
world
thanks
that
for having you
want.
on. We got to go. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mike.
That was it. I mean, it's all the tools, but man,
Concur. Everything you're saying, I actually concur with to the nth degree.
yeah. QB still between the ears at the end of the day.
What about this though? And there've been
God.
just settle down. He is, I don't know, he's 21, 22, however old he is, but he's grown a lot in the last 3 or 4 years. In high school, he came off as a huge douche when we saw him on Netflix or whatever. And he was probably a little tough to deal with at Oklahoma. And it feels like he's been humbled a little bit. And he admits that he sort of made those strides. Are you more concerned with just the on-field stuff and the off-field has nothing to do with it?
Yeah, it's more on field. And I also
Okay.
think he is older. I think he will be 24 when he's drafted also. So he is on the older side.
Yeah, that's right. 24 in September. All right, Rick, are you walking back all the nice things you said about him in Mobile?
No, he had a good, nice Senior Bowl week because he can throw the ball. He just can't make decisions. That's all.
Well, I have him going late day 2, and I'm not coming off of that unless his arms fall off.
Okay.
All right. You're a day 3 guy too, Rick?
He's a day 3 guy for me.
I think I asked you this before. You would take Bo Nix over Spencer?
Yeah, I would.
And Mike, where do you have Bo? Because Bo's a very volatile, depending on who you're talking to in terms of where
I'm
he's
pretty
at.
high on Bo. I think he's a first rounder. So.
Okay. All right. I mean, you're not alone in thinking that. I think, Rick, you're a day 2 guy on Bo. I think I'm a day 2 guy on Bo. He's not on our list, but he certainly could help himself too. Although I don't know how. I mean, I think he's a really good player. And I feel like he gets the short end of the stick for reasons that are sort of unclear. All right, next up. And Rick, this is a guy I thoroughly enjoyed watching, but I'll come to Mike first to see what his thoughts are. Anthony Gold, wide receiver at Oregon State. Undersized, 5'8", 172 unofficial, so we'll see what he ends up. But he played a ton of outside. Like, he was 95% lined up outside. That's where he did most of his damage. And he also is a legit punt returner, which is an added element that you consider when you draft these guys. So do you get a chance to watch Anthony, Mike?
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think about it?
Man, he's electric, but to me, he's kind of in that. I'm trying to think of the guy. Who was I thinking of when I was? He's too small, man. And like at the NFL level, I think he had a sub 70-inch wingspan at the
69 and change. That's right.
Which is like the amount of guys who are even in a 3 deep with that small wingspan. You can like count on one hand. The NFL just doesn't. The windows are small, and guys have to be able to make plays outside the frame. And when you're that small, it's just hard to put a guy in a progression and like feel comfortable targeting him routinely. So he's kind of just like going to be a role bit player. But in that, I mean, he could be, I think it's Trey Tucker. Is that who I'm thinking of? The Cincinnati, is that kind of similar?
Trey was small.
And he ended up being a top 100 pick, I think. So it's possible, but like he needs to test off the charts for that to even come close to being the case.
And I'm glad you mentioned Trey Tucker, because this guy, his catch radius is enormous. If you don't know how big he is, he'll catch anything around him, but to your point, he has short arms, so it's still going to be a small sort of window you're throwing into. Rick, are we learning anything from Tyler Scott, Trey Tucker, Tank Dell last year in terms of these guys being boosted up the draft boards, or no?
Yeah, I'm learning this guy isn't them. That's what I'm learning.
You're still down on Calvin Austin, who was a fantastic player in my mind, but go ahead.
This guy is kind of like when me and Ryan go to these coffee shops that he likes to go to every time we travel together, except his arms are shorter when he's trying to reach into his pocket. I have to end up paying for all. Don't worry, Ryan. I'll expense this if I'm allowed. This guy got shorter arms than Ryan, trying to pay for a bill every time we go out to eat somewhere.
Why do you tell these stories on me? These aren't even true.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'm high on Anthony Gold. I'm higher on Anthony Gold than on Spencer Rattler. So I take that for what it's worth.
That's good. So when he gets drafted in the 7th round and gets signed as a college free agent, good for you. Because the Washington game was horrendous, in my opinion. He had a drop. There was every time they throw the ball down the field to him, it's like trying to throw to a gnat. I don't think he made one contested catch.
He had 4 on the season.
If he's underneath and runs all those little shallow crosses and some of the out routes, he's a little stiff in his hips, getting into and out of his cuts. He's a body catcher. He extended one time away from his frame. He does have some electric speed after the catch, although he goes down on first contact.
Oh my gosh.
I do recognize some punt return, although I have to go back and watch it. So hopefully he's a better punt returner than receiver. And he would make it as a punt returner first and maybe a 4th receiver.
I think he has better hands than you're giving credit for, just so I'm on the record for that, so people aren't coming at me when he ends up making the Pro Bowl as a rookie. I'm just going to put that out there.
Okay.
Thank you both for laughing at that. All right, next up, and I'm keeping the team small, so Malik Washington out of UVA, 5'9", 192, so he's an inch taller and 20 pounds heavier. My comp for him, Rick, before you get fired up, is Demario Douglas out of Liberty, who had a good season last year when he was allowed to play for the Patriots. You say no?
No.
All right. Well, we'll see. We'll find out together. Mike, did you feel any better about Malik, or is he on team small catch radius 42?
I actually like Malik better, and he has quite a bit longer arm than Gold. I think it's actually, so his wingspan's bigger than Roman Wilson in this draft class. Is bigger than like Chris Olave, Jaden Reed, guys from recent who have produced as rookies. And I think wingspan is a better proxy than height for a lot of things. Not a lot of times you're going way up to get a ball, and especially for a guy who's going to be a slot receiver like Washington is. That's probably more important than just pure height. I like him. I think he's great after the catch in terms of like winning with either physicality. He can run past guys. I think he's going to test out pretty well too, whether it's like jumps 40. I think he's a pretty all around gifted athlete. I is still obviously on the small end, but I do think he could. I have him somewhere in the day 2, day 3 fringe.
Oh, okay. There. Yeah, I had him like early day 3. So Rick, kick returner, not a punt returner. What are your problems with Malik? Because I think he's a pretty good player.
Yeah, no, he's very productive as long as he's short and underneath. They throw him some bubble screens, a lot of spacing routes, a lot of shallow crosses. The one thing I do like, he does extend the catch away from his body, unlike your other lad that you talked about earlier. Biggest negative I have on him, he got open a couple times down the field on an out and go move where it seemed like busted coverage. I think he does have very good hands. My biggest concern is I don't think this guy is going to be closer to 4.6 than he is 4.5. I think he's going to be in a 4.55 range. I don't see the speed that your Liberty Flash had last year. I think this guy is slower. Yeah. But this guy runs with some authority for a little guy after the catch. He tries to run through you. He's got some contact balance. He's built a little bit like a small running back. It reminded me a little bit with the ball in his hands after the catch. The biggest thing I'm concerned about with this player is the speed.
Yeah, Demario 5'8", 180, 4.44. You don't see 4.44 from.
I'll bet you $1 he runs over 4.5.
Do you want to say 4.55 so I have a chance or no?
Yes, 4.55.
All right, give me that under, Debo. Just made it easy $2 on this guy. All right, next up, my final guy. I think it's my final guy. Yeah, another young man that was at the Shrine Bowl, and I really enjoyed watching him. Dadrian Taylor Demerson, safety out of Texas Tech, and I'll probably be higher on him than most people, but I think he plays with an edge coming downhill. He's looking to run through somebody. I thought he was pretty good in terms of deep coverage, played primarily deep safety, 8 pass breakups, 4 interceptions in 2023. Mike, what you think about old DTD?
I think he's definitely going to run sub 4.55. If you put that as the line. I mean, he's fast. This guy has real range. He's definitely one of the better athletes in the safety class. He's small though, man. I mean, 5'10", 189 at safety that's a tough sell for a lot of teams. And then small, and then not like a plus tackler either. He's not a wrap up, drag down, consistent guy in that regard. So I think that's just a tough sell, even for as good as he looked in coverage in the 1-on-1s at the Shrine. I thought he was the best safety there, obviously. But that's pure coverage ability at safety is just a small part of the job compared to, finishing those plays in the back end that are so important. So I see him probably as a day 3 guy.
So Rick, to Mike's point, he didn't miss 9 tackles. He throws his body around, but he's not a wrap-up tackler. Is that something you can fix or no?
I don't know because of the size. I mean, I don't have any question with his courage. I just think he just bounces off some guys. And I think he's straight line fast. I think when he has to adjust or turn his hips, I don't see that instant acceleration for an undersized guy. If you watch the Baylor game, it may be the worst angle I've ever seen on a 71-yard touchdown that he gave up, closing to the outside on a deep ball. Was just horrendous. But I give him credit. The Kansas game. He had a big game against Kansas. I think he had a sack. He had a PBU. He made a nice interception down the seam. So I think this guy is going to make it as a day 3 backup special team guy because I do think he's more than willing to come up and hit. I just saw some stiffness in him for a smaller guy that bothered me.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll find out together. We'll reconvene in 3 years and see if I was right or wrong. I think Rick knows the answer to that question already. What are you laughing at? All right. Mike, thanks for joining us, man. This was actually fun. Did you have a good time, Rick?
I had a great time. It was nice to have a guest in the house.
I know. We had to be on our best behavior. We got to clean up. You vacuumed for us.
Actually, someone that had some common sense on some of the stuff we talked about today, which was great.
I know.
Except for damn Notre Dame right tackle.
I had to just bring up the Notre Dame guy.
Mike was honest about it, though. He was harder on Blake than I think either of us were. A lot of the guys that you guys didn't like, I love. So we'll find out. We'll see how it goes. And next week, of course, is the Combine. You going to be in Indianapolis, Mike?
I will be. Yes.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll see you then.
For sure.
Yep. Anyway, in the meantime, thanks for hanging out with us. Remember, you can check out Mike Renner Ranks podcast, wherever you podcast. Thanks as always to my guy Rick. Thanks to Debo for producing, and thanks to all you guys who watch and listen and comment. On Thursday, Rick, doing a mock draft, 2 rounds, speed edition. So look forward to that. That's not a joke. We'll be back on Thursday. See you guys then.